guys.
Manu Raju live on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. Let's get some perspective now with Republican Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. So you have these conflicting messages between the president, who says the shutdown hurt Republicans at the polls, and Senate Leader Thune, who says that, as Manu put it, the elections were going to be as they were. Democrats are now calling for direct negotiations with the president. Do you think it's time for him to get more involved in reopening the federal government?
I think the bottom line is we need to negotiate, and I've already shown willingness to do that. I have a proposal with Tom Suozzi, Josh Gottheimer, and Jeff Hurd that extends the COVID-era ACA tax credits, but it puts income caps on it. Also ensures that these tax credits go directly to lowering people's premiums and not a big check to any company. I think this is the stuff that we should be doing. I don't know if the president has to be doing it, but in the appropriations process, we have to get a compromise on these bills that Democrats and Republicans can support. And I think if we did that, we could get the government back open. But, on these elections, normally the party in power is going to lose. I mean, you're going to go backwards. But I think what should alarm Republicans is the margins of victory in New Jersey and Virginia. They weren't even close. And you got to look at it. The Democrats are galvanized. They're angry at DOJ cuts that were on and off the chaos. They're angry at whether it's the Guard, the National Guard being sent to our cities. I mean, a whole host of issues has galvanized the Democrats, which is somewhat normal. But I think what's concerning is a lot of our swing voters also went back towards Democrats, mainly because they don't see an improvement in the economy. And I think tariffs are part of that problem. And I think the president, by trying to assign blame on the shutdown, I think he's missing the bigger picture on what was the cause of the defeat last night. Right now, a lot of polling shows 50-50 on who to blame, maybe even more blaming the Democrats on the shutdown. But I don't think that was the issue for the losses yesterday. I think it's the galvanized Democrats and swing voters who don't see an improvement in the economy.
I think you're right in that what we've heard from voters is that affordability remains a chief concern, even though it's a big part of the reason that President Trump was elected, right? He claims not to have inflation, but it has not stayed at the Fed's 2% goal. It actually recently went up. Further, prices at the grocery store, they're up about 1.5% since he took office. Do you think the administration has done enough to address affordability?
Well, he thinks tariffs is a way forward to bring back manufacturing, and I don't see it. The Republicans have not supported tariffs since the 1930s, and the tariff strategy has been a lot of tariffs on and off again, and it's been very unpredictable. And I think our economy has had instability because of this. And the average person, when they go to the supermarket, as you say, they've not seen an improvement. And I don't think you've seen improvement in our job numbers. A whole host of data we're not seeing, really not going backwards, but it's not going forward. And I really think tariffs have undermined the president's economic progress here. And he's believed in it since the 1980s, but I think it's been misguided. And I think it was this area that hurt him with swing voters yesterday. Now, the Democrats are going to be galvanized. They always are in the midterm, the minority party. They're more galvanized than ever. As much as they hate each other, they definitely are unified against Trump. But I think the biggest issue is the swing voter thing, and it's the economy. If we don't win the economy, we're going to lose next year in the midterms.
Speaker Johnson doesn't share that level of alarm, he says, in part because of the way that he sees redistricting efforts playing out, given the result that we saw with Prop 50 in California, offsetting the 5 seats that were redistricted to lean Republican in Texas. Do you anticipate Republicans are going to lean even further into this effort, including potentially in Nebraska?
I don't think so in Nebraska. We're probably 2 votes shy of any redistricting process here. But that said, if you look at every state, and I've looked at the analysis, if every state redistricts in a partisan way, the Republicans would pick up about 10 seats. And so I think a lot of studies show that. The Democrats have already done a lot of aggressive redistricting. For example, Illinois, you can't make it even any worse hardly. It's a terrible example of gerrymandering. And so I do think we're going to see Republicans try to do more. I don't think we're going to see it in Nebraska. But in the end, we may pick up 2 or 3 seats because of redistricting or gerrymandering, but I don't know if that can overcome a normal midterm election cycle. And if we can get an economy in a stronger spot, that'll put us in a better spot for next year. But I really have qualms about the tariff strategy. I've always had it. I've always had concerns, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Supreme Court rules. And I could tell by their questioning today that I don't think they're sold on the tariff and that the president has these authorities.
Congressman, before we go, I have to ask you about this rift that has been playing out in the right over Tucker Carlson's recent friendly interview with white nationalist Nick Fuentes, and generally how much influence he and his brand of anti-Semitism and hate have within the party. A Wall Street Journal commentator described it as a watershed in the campaign to make racism cool again, arguing that the right has a racism problem. How do you see it?
Personally, I totally reject Nick Fuentes. He should have no spot in our party. He's a racist, anti-Semite. He says he admires Hitler and Stalin. That is not a Republican. That is not a conservative. And I criticize Tucker Carlson for putting people like him on his program and not asking hard questions or pushing back. It's not just him. It's a whole host of people that he platforms. And Tucker Carlson, he's wrong on Ukraine, I believe. I think he's wrong on Israel. He's an isolationist of the 1930s Republican model, not a Ronald Reagan type at all. And I frankly think he's bad for the party. I think he's hurts us in the long run. So I'm glad to see criticism, particularly on Nick Fuentes, but also on Tucker Carlson. I would say Steve Bannon as well. Steve Bannon is a toxic voice in our party that hurts us overall. And I think it's time that we stand up and say, you're not welcome. You know, on the Democrat side, they got a much bigger problem with the anti-Semitism and Israel, which is two separate issues. I get that. But in both, I'd say the Democrats are very split. I think the Republicans are 90-10. I don't want that 10